On today's Locked On Jayhawks, the top 5 biggest strengths for KU basketball in 2024 to 2025.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can give me a follow on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. You can tune into the show. It's called Locked On Jayhawks. Anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to the show. Again, YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. Today, we're going to be talking about the top 5 biggest strengths for KU basketball that we feel like headed into the season in 2024 to 2025. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, so we're going to work in reverse order from number 5 to number 1 before we get into those top 5 biggest strengths for KU basketball in the 2024 to 2025 season. I'll give you a little honorable mention one here that I just wanted to mention. Like Allen Fieldhouse is such an advantage for this team each and every year. There's magic every time they play there. There's this just unbelievable aura and energy. And for some teams, it can spook them. Other teams rise to the occasion there, but it still feels like, Kansas gets that extra edge playing at Allen Fieldhouse. And, even in years where they haven't been as good of teams as we're maybe used to, the years that they haven't been 1 seeds or 2 seeds in the NCAA tournament or, something, they've still found a way to either go undefeated at home or, only lose 1 game. Like last year, you only lose 1 game at home. That 2018-2019 team that was also a 4 seed, they went undefeated at home. So that is a big strength for you that you do have Allen Fieldhouse, because that's going to probably win you a game or 2 over the course of the season. Number 5, though, for the 5 biggest strengths for KU basketball in the 2024 to 2025 season is jump shooting. This would not have been on the list if we were talking about last year's team. In fact, it would be on the list of the biggest weaknesses for last year's team. You didn't have enough volume and you didn't have enough percentage in terms of how you shot the basketball from mid-range, from three-point range, from deep three-point range, from the free throw line, right? Like you were just lacking in the shooting department a season ago. Enter the offseason, and Bill Self goes out, adds Rylan Griffen, sharpshooter, AJ Storr, who's a scorer, Zeke Mayo, who is a scorer and a sharpshooter. Shaquille Moore shooting 36% a season ago, and he's somebody who can score the basketball a little bit. So you added a lot of shooting onto the roster. And we went into, on a past episode, so if you're an everydayer, you caught this, and thank you for doing that. Of course, you can still go back and rewatch it or watch it for the first time if you missed it, talking about the 3-point ability for this Kansas team based on last year's percentages from everybody that they have and career percentages based on everybody that they have. And kind of the conclusion there was based on those, you're probably projected this season to shoot somewhere between 36 to 37% from 3. That is night and day from what you did a season ago, in which you were closer to that 33, 34% range. And it was on much lower volume than you're going to be projected to have for this upcoming season. If we assume the starting 5 is Dajuan Harris, Rylan Griffen, AJ Storr, KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson, if we assume that's starting 5, and who knows, maybe there's somebody who factors into that, who ends up starting and somebody comes out. But that would mean based on last season, of those 5 for the starters, you'd be getting, based off last season's numbers, 36% from 3 on a 13.7 3-point attempts per game. And that's just from the starters. Again, last season as a whole, as a team, you were closer to that 33% range on about 17 takes. That was for the full team, the starters and the bench. So you're almost to the volume of what the starters, of what everybody had on last year's team, just with the starters, and on a significantly higher volume. I know 33 to 36%, like, it's 3 percentage points. That's 3 makes over 100. Well, you might take 100 threes over the course of like 4 games, right? So 3 makes, almost 1 a game over that, 4-game span. Like maybe 3 of them come in the same game though, as opposed to averaging out 1 per game. And maybe that's the difference in you winning or losing that one specific game. If we compare this team, this upcoming 2024 to 25 team, to the 2022 national title team, I think you could make a lot of comparisons in terms of the shooting or lack of shooting based on player to player. So what if we compare KJ Adams to David McCormick basically you have somebody who you're not getting threes from, okay? As far as if we're just comparing like the rosters here. Hunter Dickinson is actually a better three-point shooter than 2022 Jalen Wilson was. Now, Jalen Wilson in 2023, his final season was a better three-point shooter. But 2022 Jalen Wilson, the national championship year, he was at 26% from three. That's it, on 3.1 attempts per game. Hunter Dickinson was on 35.4% from three on 2 attempts per game a season ago. So you're talking about Hunter actually being, a better three-point shooter than Jalen was if we're just comparing this Kansas team to the 2022 team, which clearly was good enough to win the title. Dajuan shoots a tad more than he did in 2022, so I guess you give a slight lean there. Ochai Agbaji is better than Rylan Griffen, but the three-point shooting is closer than you might actually think. Ochai Agbaji shot 40.7% from three. That was on 6.5 attempts per game as a senior at KU. Rylan Griffen last year as a sophomore at Alabama, he shot 39.2%, so 1.5% lower. Close though, both guys who were very good shooters on 5.3 attempts per game. So again, 1.2 attempts less per game. So Ochai, better overall player and better three-point shooter there, but it's closer than you might think. Then Christian Braun, he was a better efficiency three-point shooter than AJ Storr, but Storr is actually going to give you more volume from three and the variety of how he can shoot them. Christian had a bit of a slower release. It was a longer load up. And we're seeing this in the NBA. He doesn't take a ton of threes. Some of it is maybe that. Other parts of it is maybe just he is like a team first guy and he doesn't like to shoot a lot of threes. And that was something, if you remember back, like even Bill Self harked on it at Kansas. He was like, we need him to shoot some of these open shots that he's not actually taking. AJ Storr is not going to have that problem. And AJ Storr, I think, can get more like off the dribble than Christian did with the 3-point game. But CB shot 38.6% from three, but it was just 3.3 attempts per game that season. That's crazy to think about, that Jalen shot 26% from three that year, and they were basically taking the same amount of threes per game. So AJ Storr for his career is at 35.2% from three. And that's on 3.5 attempts per game, which is more than Christian Braun shot his final season at Kansas. And the percentage is not as good, but it's still above average for Storr there. And that includes one year where he played 21 minutes per game at St. John's. So if he's playing 30 minutes per game, that volume is going to go up to 4 or 5 attempts per game. So that one's just kind of a pick your poison, what you're looking for from three-point shooter conversation. And then Zeke Mayo and Remy Martin, that's similar. You're talking about somebody who, in the case of what we're projecting here, Zeke Mayo coming off the bench, Remy Martin coming off the bench, both shooters. Remy, as good of a shooter as he was, low-key only took 2.5 3-point attempts per game. So Zeke might end up taking more than that. I don't know. And then you wind up with a similar comp, and that team had enough three-point shooting to win it all. In fact, I would have viewed it as kind of a strength on that year's team. So I think that this team, there's going to be quite, like, that year's team was unbelievable in transition. This year's team could be good in transition. I think Storr will be really good in transition. Dajuan and KJ are good passers in transition game, and having KJ be able to run in transition or throw down lobs or pass in transition makes him a good transition player. Hunter Dickinson is an outstanding outlet passer, which helps you in transition. Rylan Griffen plays really well in transition. That's what he did a lot at Alabama. So this team could be a really good transition team too, but it's hard for me to say, because that team, for my money, was the best transition team in the country. So you could be near that at least. That one, I think, had more defensive versatility than this one does too. But this one could actually be better scoring inside than that one was. And it could still be really good in transition, and it could still be around the same range in terms of three-point shooting, because all the transfers they added are good free throw shooters. Most of the transfers they added are good three-point shooters. AJ Storr can also operate in the mid-range jump shooting too, if we're talking about all types of jump shooting. And so, I think that the jump shooting is actually one of the bigger strengths on this year's team. Let's get to number 4, number 3, number 2, number 1 coming up in just a moment on Locked On Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by Ibata. Sandals, sunscreen, snacks for the little kids. What do these have in common? You're probably buying a ton again this summer, but don't stress about the cost. Use Ibata and get cash back on all of your purchases when you stock up on all of your summer essentials. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys for the kids, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Ibata, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. Thank you to everydayers tuning into each and every show. And we'll have later this week, we're going to get into some KU football content. Players KU football most needs to step up in preseason camp. We're scheduled to have a Football Friday episode. We're going to get into a conversation about why it's important for somebody to be a first-round pick on this KU basketball roster and the importance of that and who it could possibly be. But continuing on here with our top 5 strengths for Kansas men's basketball in the 2024 to 2025 season. Up to number 4 on the list is guard defense for the biggest strengths. So Dajuan Harris 2 years ago wins Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. Last season, I still think he was an overall good defender for you, but the year he won Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, he was a great defender. He was an elite defender, one of the best in the country. And last season, I think he was asked to do more on the offensive end. And I think part of that was because of the roster and not being super deep, and he's playing more minutes. And so that took a bit of a toll on the defensive end of the court, where he just wasn't as impactful consistently as he was from the year before. I think this season, with having more guys that can bring up the basketball, that can initiate the offense, that can handle the basketball, I think Dajuan's going to get back to that mode he was 2 years ago, where he's closer to being the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. So you have him. Shaquille Moore comes in, and I mean, you could argue he's KU's other best defender, and both of them are kind of lead guard types who can be bulldogs and guard 1s and 2s on the opposing rosters. I'd imagine with Shaquille Moore, he's going to, pressure the ball like full court man-to-man for certain stretches to try to wear down other teams, point guards and stuff, if he's playing 15, 20 minutes per game or something. But when they throw out that lineup of Dajuan and Shaquille Moore, I mean, they can throw out a lineup at the end of the game. If you're looking for a stop, you're up by, 4 with a minute left or something like that. You could throw out a lineup with KJ Adams at the 5. You have Shaquille Moore and Dajuan Harris at the 1 and 2, and then you figure out who your best kind of wing defenders are from everybody else. I don't know. Maybe it's even KJ at the 4 and Floyd Badunga at the 5 if you're just looking for a stop at the end of the game or something like that. There's a lot that you can kind of mix and match with in those situations, but I think guard defense is going to be really good for KU. We've also seen it from like Rylan. Griffen has shown flashes being able to defend guards like RJ Davis. He did in the NCAA tournament. I think Raquise Passmore, you look at this strong athletic wing. Typically that means you have defensive potential. I mean, if you're long, you're athletic, right? All it takes is figuring out the scheme and the system, what's being asked of you, which can be difficult for freshmen because there's a big learning curve there, but he has defensive potential. I think McDowell tries hard on that end if he ends up playing, which I don't know if that'll be the case, but I think you're going to have really good guard defense on next year's team. Okay, number 3 on the list. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment on Locked On Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by Factor. Warmer, sunnier days are calling. Fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with more options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor Fresh's never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. Forget New Year's resolutions. Get it done in the summer. Get that beach bod. What are you waiting for? With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. Crush your wellness goals this summer with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. Make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. I love the fact that there's all sorts of different foods to try so that you can find the ones you like, but you can also feel like you're getting something new, that you're not just sticking with the same thing over and over again. So head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code lockedoncollege50. Locked on College 50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Into the top 3 we go. Number 3, biggest strengths for KU basketball. I think passing. So last season they were number 1 in the country in assists per field goal made. I don't think you want to be that high typically. It shows that you are a really good passing team, which KU was. The reason you don't want to be that high, like you're fine. If you're the best passing team in the country, That's good. Being number one in this stat is not necessarily good. It's better to be number one than to be last, but there's a line there. And the reason that I say this is because you want to be a good passing team. You want to be a team that shares the rock. But there's a line because if you're number one, if you're number 5 in assist to field goal made ratio, a lot of times that means you don't have guys who can get a bucket off the dribble, a guy who can get a bucket in isolation, right? And so you still want to be good at this number. I think a good way of looking at this, if we went back and maybe looked at some past years for Kansas, you could still see good numbers, but they wouldn't be number one. So again, they were number one in this last year. 2023, they were 19th in the country in that, because you at least had like Jalen who could get you a one-on-one bucket. What about 2022 when they won the national championship? That season they were 105th. So again, like, you want to be a good passing team, but you want a little more creation off the bounce. That said, Kansas is a very good passing team. Dajuan Harris, great passer. KJ Adams, good passer, especially for a 4-5 man and especially in transition. Hunter Dickinson, good passer for a center and an excellent outlet passer, as we talked about earlier. Zeke Mayo, very solid passer, right? You should have 2 to 3 to 4 of those players on the court at all times. Even like Shaquille Moore is a guard who, you should be a better passer than hypothetically some just lumbering big man or something. Rylan Griffen has shown some flashes passing the basketball. He hasn't been asked to do it as much when he was at Alabama, but I think this is going to be an excellent passing team once again, but it has more of that pop off the bounce than a season ago, and 3-point shooting and jump shooting, as we talked about earlier. Number 2 on this, though, is scoring inside. This was KU's probably biggest strength a season ago, scoring the basketball inside. Now, there was a stretch during Big 12 play because of their lack of 3-point shooting. Other teams were really able to camp inside and prevent their biggest strength from taking over games, because earlier in the season, even if they weren't hitting threes, they were just bludgeoning teams on the inside. Teams started to adjust. The funny thing, though, is that even though KU's inside scoring suffered a notch down from being, like statistically early in the season, they were one of the most efficient 2-point scoring offenses in the entire country. That ended up dropping off, but they still wound up second in Big 12 only games in 2-point offense because they were still that good at it. If they would have been a better 3-point shooting team or had better spacing, they would have been number 1 with a bullet. So still, this is a strength. And because you have more shooting, again, going back to our number 5 thing, which is the jump shooting, which should be much better this season. That means more spacing for the floor. That means more opportunities for guys on the team to have open lanes. So I'm thinking like Dajuan Harris, right? He struggled with layups last season, which some of them were just open layups. So like that's something that, whether you have spacing or not, you just got to make the open ones. But I think there were some of his floaters that have typically gone down in previous years that he didn't have as much space this year to get off. KJ Adams is really good finishing at the rim, especially if he's one-on-one. You have a better spacing, he's going to have more of those and more dunks. Hunter Dickinson, if he's getting more space at the rim, he's going to dominate at the rim. And then you have guys like AJ Storr, who are power athletes, who, if he's getting good spacing, he can, drive a guy straight line drive to the rim and finish at the rim. So I think this is going to be an excellent scoring inside team. What is the number 1 strength, though, for KU basketball in 2024 to 2025? Tell you in a second. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, which, it might not be prime sports season right now, but I'll tell you what, there still is a good amount going on. We got the Olympics right now. Been loving watching. Everybody has like their favorite Olympic sports. I love the swimming, which I've been betting on at FanDuel. I love the track and field, but there's always like that one other sport or maybe new sport that you pick up every year. Loved watching the rugby women's sevens the other day. U.S. just like trucking over Japan and scoring it with, I don't know what they're called. They're not called touchdowns, but regardless, so much fun. And you can get in on that action. You can get in on the golf action that's happening in the Olympics this week. Royals killing it right now. You can get your futures for college football, the NFL, and FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. All right. So finishing things up, what is the number 1 strength for Kansas men's basketball in the 2024 to 2025 season? And don't forget, you can check out all of our Locked On Podcast Network if you're looking for a specific school, if you're looking for a conference, you're looking for another sport, you're getting your KU fill here, maybe you're a Chiefs fan, maybe you're a Royals fan, you can get that fill here with Locked On Podcast Network as well. Our number 1 strength for KU basketball this upcoming season, this is kind of cheating, but I don't care, Bill Self. I know Dan Hurley is the hot thing right now. I know Dan Hurley has won back-to-back national titles. Dan Hurley is an excellent college basketball coach, and that whole staff is phenomenal. Bill Self is still the best coach in college basketball. I mean, if you want to cross compare, you could say both have the 2 titles, and then you could say, okay, Dan Hurley doesn't have any other Final Fours. Bill Self has more, right? And part of that is the longevity, and Bill Self's had another 10 years on Dan Hurley, basically. But Bill Self, for my money, is still the best coach in college basketball. And I don't mean that as a slight. Dan Hurley is an excellent coach. Like, if you're talking tier 1 coaches in college basketball, I think it's those 2 guys. It's like Bill Self and Dan Hurley for active coaches right now, right? But I think Bill Self is the guy. And even if it is Hurley, I didn't mean to turn this into a Self versus Hurley thing. Doesn't matter. Bill Self would still be a giant strength if you were saying he's the second best coach in college basketball, which, again, I'm saying number 1. But the out of timeouts are unbelievable for Bill Self each and every year. That's like stealing candy from a baby and the amount of points it's going to get them per game. The pulling the right strings at the right moment. You're never going to bat 100%. So, like, you could go back to last year and be like, well, why didn't you figure out this with the bench? I think the short answer to that would be you couldn't figure out the right rotation for the team, or who should be starting or who should be doing this or that, probably because you just didn't have the options. Like, no matter who you put in that spot, it wasn't working. So, like, you're never going to bat 100% in terms of figuring out the rotation and pulling the right strings. But 9 times out of 10, Bill Self is going to get his specific team playing to the highest level that they're going to be able to play. And that's kind of the point here, like trusting to get the best version of this team that you possibly can. Bill Self is excellent at everything, developing the players, scouting and everything. They've added stuff to the staff. I think that was a good move by Bill Self to say, hey, things didn't go well last year. What can we do? Let's go add Chase Buford, give us another angle of things from another league over in Australia. Maybe they can add some plays. Maybe they can, give us another insight on what's going on here, that we can get better at some of these things. And that's what good coaches do. And Bill Self is the best coach in college basketball. So yes, that is your biggest strength each and every game. And it would be the following season. It would be the year before as well. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll be back tomorrow to talk which KU football players that Lance Leipold and company needs the team to step up most during fall camp.